Hello and welcome to the Success Showcase. I'm your host Eric Lopkin with the Modern Observer Group, and with me as always is Chip Janiszewski from the Happiness and Success GPS. Chip, how you doing this week?
Positively great today, Eric. How about you?
I'm doing fantastic. We are wrapping up January, moving into a new month. Yeah, the new year is underway and things are going well.
Yep, they are. There's a lot of positive things going on out there, and so obviously it's a great time to talk about stuff like that.
Absolutely. And what we're going to talk about today is the reasoning behind self improvement, ways to do it, and why it pays to be a lifelong learner. And, I know so many people that hear that phrase and they just back away because when you say learner, they immediately think back to the classroom. And, and a lot of them, you know, they're still thinking about a high school classroom going, no, I don't ever want to go back to that.
Yeah, I mean, basically, the nice thing about everything that we have out there today, I mean, as far as going back to the classroom, that's a long, long time ago. Now, what we're talking about today is self studies, and you control everything as far as that goes. What the topic is, how you do it, and that kind of thing. So it's just really, really important to do that. And it's a lot of fun too. And there's so many different ways that you can do it. Some people out there might think, oh, I'm not going to read every day and so on and so forth, or I'm not going to do this, or I'm not going to do that. But these days, it's as easy as listening to a podcast like this or going on a website and typing in something in a search and so on. So it's really, really easy to do. But the most important thing is to just get in the habit of doing it.
Absolutely. And, even if it's just a matter of picking up a book or listening to an audio book, doing it on a regular basis really does push you and it gets you in a great mindset. Every year I make the resolution that I'm going to read 50 books that year. And usually I do a bit more. This year, I actually decided I'm going to push a little harder, and I decided I'm going to do 100 books this year. And so far, I'm on pace to do that. But even listening to different books, and I've done so far 5 books this year. Um, some of which were new to me, some of which I'm listening to again. But when you listen, either taking in the new information or being reminded of things you already knew but may have forgotten, it's amazing the connections that you start making in your head. And this is actually a problem with today's world because instead of learning things, most people are just looking them up. So when you look something up in Google and then, you use it, you forget about it, you're not making these connections and seeing patterns in the world, seeing how different things relate. And that's something that, aside from being great for your mindset and fantastic to energize you, it also makes you aware of patterns that happen. And for example, I just read a book called The Boys of Winter, and this was all about the 1980 U.S. Olympic hockey team. Now, we've got the Winter Olympics coming up, so I thought that it was a great time to read that book. And of course, I remember watching the game, most of us do. But what struck me was the description of the United States at the time. And honestly, if you changed Afghanistan for Ukraine and Carter for Biden, I was struck by the fact that they could have been describing the world now. And of course, had I not read this book, I would never have seen that pattern. So you get different insights, even on things that you don't expect to.
Yeah, I mean, obviously, it's amazing looking back. I forgot about that part of it. I just thought about how great it
Yeah.
was to finally beat the Russians. Which is basically like the New York Yankees playing my alma mater, Providence College, which doesn't even have a baseball team anymore in baseball and losing. And so it's just so amazing doing that. I mean, one of the things that I like a lot as far as subject matter goes, and just going in and searching around, is about 3 or 4 years ago, I got off of my DirecTV program and I went to YouTube TV, and so I mean I use that for my regular TV, but with that I got the YouTube itself, which I'd never used hardly at all on a computer, but now I have it on the big screen TV, and I watch that more than anything else because it's so easy to use and it's all topic driven. I mean, basically, you can go in there and they have a menu so you can look up different interests, sports, news, everything else in there. But you can type in a search phrase and you can come up with things that way. One of the best things you can do is put them in your library so you can go back and watch things again. But I find myself using that all the time. I mean, if you are interested, those of you folks out there, about how things were back then, there's a series out there right now, and I forget exactly what the name of it is, but it's just a year in review, 8 minutes, year to year. And I think it started like around 51 or 52, which was right before that I was born. And I just go in there, they're 8 minute segments, and I go back and kind of reminisce about all the stuff that's going on there. These are the type of things that you can do. I mean, if you want to go back and search out a time period or topics and so on and so forth, and it's not just YouTube, I just use that myself, but there's all kinds of other places out there to do that. And that can develop interest for you so that if you want to go out and get a book or an audio book and read more about that, it's all there. But if you want a resource to start with, just go to a YouTube or other types of things and start um, listing topics before you go in there, but start just researching them and see what you come up with. Because right now, the whole world is a library in so many different ways. And there's no way that you can't, if you want to do it, put in 10, 15 minutes, a half an hour a day in something that interests you, and it will grow on you for sure. I guarantee it.
Oh, certainly. And you're talking about YouTube, but at this point, streaming services in general have become an amazing resource for documentaries. I know Disney Plus has the National Geographic channels and National Geographic documentaries. HBO Max has the Smithsonian Channel and their documentaries. Netflix has done a ton of original documentaries. And it's amazing the topics that you can find out about. It's not even just things that you would think about, hey, I want to look this up. One day, we were just going through Netflix documentaries and we watched one documentary called Bathtubs Over Broadway. And it was the story of corporate musicals that were done at trade shows or corporate retreats, things like that. And I mean, it was hysterical. But it was a whole aspect of performance and, sales process that I had never seen anything about. And we followed that up with a documentary that started about kung fu movies, but the documentary actually tracked the influence of these kung fu movies into things like hip hop, rap, breakdancing. And it was just amazing to watch this because we've all seen the old kung fu movies, but never realized what a cultural impact they had. So you can always just find these new things and new ways of looking at things that you thought you knew about.
Yeah, this Bathtubs Over Broadway. I just wrote that one down. That's in Netflix, and that sounds so cool because I mean I've done some musicals and stuff like that myself, not as a star, but just because I love to do it in community theater. But that's fantastic. And yes, Disney Plus, Netflix, I have those too. And one of the neat things about that is when you go in there, if you're just thinking, what do I want to do? The first thing that they come up with is suggested lists and what's hot, what's interesting, and so on and so forth. And something is bound to catch your interest there. And you mentioned documentaries. I mean, basically, if you just think of Netflix and Disney as, full length movies and so on and so forth, there's a whole lot of shorter stuff in there too. And
Oh
Disney
yeah.
Plus and National Geographic. I mean, there's all kinds of things that you can do in those. And again, you build your own list. You go back. There's a whole lot of series on there um, where you can just pick out a topic and learn everything you can about that in a 6-part series over a few hours. I mean, recently, those of you folks who are interested talking about Disney Plus in the Beatles, they had a 3-day series about how they did their last couple of sessions, the Let It Be, and it was just amazing. This is back when everybody thought that, well, they were in the process of breaking up. But this is studio sessions, conversations, all about their lives and so on and so forth. And me watching them originally on Ed Sullivan, I mean, that was just glued to the TV for a couple of days to watch those. So, I mean, the topics on there are great. And obviously, especially Disney Plus, they're putting more of that kind of stuff on there as well as in the theaters. So it's really, really neat looking at that stuff.
Yeah, and something to remember about lifelong learning is it doesn't have to be a topic that you're pushing yourself through. I mean, I happen to like documentaries about quantum physics, but those are not everybody's cup of tea. But you can find these things like you just said, the Beatles or the Kung Fu movies, or it doesn't have to be an academic subject. It can just be something that's of interest.
Yeah, and I mean, we talk as far as personal development side of things. I mean, obviously, we always talk about positive mindset, and this is one of the ways to keep your mindset positive is by exposing yourself to things that you're interested in. But we also, as part of your whole personal package, the person in the mirror, talking about personal strategic planning for all parts of your life. Obviously, you spend probably most of your life doing your job. However, there's so many different other things that you can be doing. And especially if you don't like your job, sit down and figure out what you do like to do and start researching that too. I mean, you can get information about that, you can make connections and all that too. So it's really important to kind of put the whole thing in perspective because the bottom line is we talk about if you want to be happy and successful, you have to take care of that person in the mirror first. And that starts with just writing down a list of things that you're good at, that you're interested in, all the different things that you've done wonderful in your life, that kind of thing, and just exposing yourself to more of that and putting things in perspective. Obviously, your job is a big part of it because it's going to facilitate you being able to afford Disney Plus. But it's really, really important to do this.
Absolutely. And it's part of a successful mindset. There you can pick up a number of books about mindset, and most of them will at some point talk about the concept of a fixed mindset versus a growth mindset. And in a nutshell, the difference between those mindsets is a fixed mindset. You believe everything is as it is. There's nothing you can do to change it. It's just the luck of the draw. Whereas a growth mindset is that there's always something more you can do. You can learn new skills, you can learn new items. It's never too late to keep learning and apply those lessons to your life. And again, you really should be thinking outside of the box on some of these things because, it's not just a business book that can help you in your job. You can be watching a documentary about, as I said, the Olympic hockey team or Navy SEALs. And there's always lessons that can be taken from history and from these things that you can go, oh, I can apply this.
Yeah, absolutely. And I mean, sometimes if you're just watching regular movies about things, most of them have like good stories that are in them. And it subconsciously or very consciously shows you how people face their problems and they come out of it just by building relationships or working with people. It's so, so important to do that. And most of the good stuff out there has some bit of that in there that's working on you subconsciously while you're looking at the topic that interests you.
Absolutely. And another big advantage to looking at documentaries and reading books and listening to audiobooks is that It's giving you something to look at that or listen to that's positive. Lord knows there's so much negativity in the world. We need to pull back from that negativity. And this is a great way to do it because you're not just learning, you're learning about something you enjoy. You're improving yourself and providing a positive example for others. And, we've talked on and on about how important it is to overcome the negativity. This is a great way to do it while you're enjoying yourself, while you're improving yourself, and while you're learning more.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, as a lot of you folks who listen regularly know, I talk about power of positivity, turning obstacles into opportunities. And we talked about mindset, fixed, and growth. The fixed mindset is the one that just lives in the obstacles world, just thinking about everything that's wrong. It could be, just Eeyore looking one bad thing and another. Oh dear, oh my, it's such a bad day. The opportunity side of thing is the sky's the limit. The Incredibles, the Impossibles, all those people that can go out and just do everything that they want to do, and that's the growth thing. And really, the key is from getting out of that is to throw out all of those fixed mindset obstacles like criticizing, complaining, and bad habits and that kind of thing, and just turning them into positive experiences. I mean, you and I've talked many times about what would happen to you if you turn the word yes, but for a week into the word yes, and. You never used but after looking at a situation. You turn it into an and. You're automatically looking for opportunities and things and putting a positive spin on there. Think about that when you're looking for materials to work on as far as your personal development goes. Take a look at those ands and research them.
Absolutely. And of course, to this point, we've been talking mostly about self improvement regarding the mind. But self improvement goes beyond that. There's the body and the soul. So, in addition to lifelong learning and improving yourself, by learning new information and getting new points of view, it's also important to exercise, to meditate. And of course, you can get more information that in all of the books and documentaries and all of this. But it's so important that you follow through with this. We need, one of the things they've found as they're studying COVID is the fact that the better shape you're in, the less it affects you. And quite frankly, this is not just true for COVID, it's true for just about every illness out there. If you're building up your immune system, if you're in good shape, if you're not obese, you feel better, you can do more, you can withstand more of the obstacles. And of course, the energy, we talked about how it can be energizing to, learn new things. Working out, being in good shape increases that energy even more.
Yeah, absolutely. And I mean, the most important thing to remember out there, which we've talked about a whole lot too, if you are in the down state right now, or if you're, kind of procrastinating on what's going on, just live in the present moment. Just take that moment to go take a walk, take a look outside today. I mean, it may be cold, but I'm looking out my back window and it's beautiful out there with the snow on the ground and the blue skies and the trees and so on and so forth. And you can always turn that around. Talk about the yes buts. If you just turn it into yes and, it's as simple as just taking a look in the present moment and appreciating what's right in front of you, no matter what it is. And if you break it down into simple little chunks, I know I talked in the past about Lao Tzu, the 3 things to learn in life: simplicity, patience, and compassion. Simplicity is breaking it down to the present moment, what's there. Patience is just pausing and taking a look at it and appreciating it before you do whatever you're going to do. And then compassion, which is so, so important. If everybody in this world had compassion in the present moment for whatever they're dealing with, whether it's people that they disagree with and so on and so forth, and they look to understand them first and to avoid conflict, think of what the world would be. So, I mean, simplicity, patience, compassion, if you think about that, to run your present moment and you put yourself into a daily routine to really work on this yourself, it's wonderful.
Yeah, and it's so important to remember that simplicity because the main reason that most people procrastinate and put off doing something like this is because it feels overwhelming. It's like starting a whole workout regimen. Well, you know what? Don't start a whole workout regimen. Start by just going for a walk for 5 minutes, finding time to read more. Just read 2 pages. And then the next day, read another 2 pages and go for another 5 minute walk. Between those two things, you've spent maybe 10 minutes. You can find 10 minutes in your day.
And as soon as you do that, your mind is going to really be flowing with positivity, saying, yeah, I did this. This isn't so bad. Hey, I'm really enjoying this walk today. Or this book is really cool. I mean, once you start it and get yourself into a daily routine, it's unstoppable and it's just wonderful. I mean, I started with something small back in the early '00s, and I've worked myself into a wonderful just daily routine in the morning to get things going on a positive note and things during the day. And it's changed my perspective, the way that I look at things. It's automatically made me more patient on things and putting things in simple terms. So try it. You like it.
And there are ways you can turn these things into habits. When you make your bed in the morning, leave the book that you're going to read on the pillow so that you have that reminder before you turn in. Let me read 2 pages. When you come home after work, put on your workout clothes. That'll get you in the mood. It's like, oh, well, I've got the workout clothes on. All right, let me just take a quick walk. And then that walk will be a little longer. And then maybe you'll add free weights into it. And figure out what it is that motivates you. And one of the biggest things that you can do is don't forget to reward yourself for doing these things. Because that way you'll go, oh, hey, I read a whole chapter. You know what? I'm going to reward myself. I'm going to listen to my favorite album. Or, I've exercised an hour this week. I'm going to give myself a treat. I'm going to have my favorite cookie. And you'll notice I said singular cookie. It's because you don't want to get rid of all the gains, but take things step by step, do them little by little and build up. And again, one of the most important things is find things that you enjoy. And that's a lot easier to do with, documentaries and books and audiobooks than it necessarily is for workouts. In fact, I was just reading one of the main reasons that people stop working out is because they get bored of their routine. So change things up. When if you're putting together your reading list, don't read all of the same type of book. Toss some fiction in there, toss some adventure in with the self-improvement and the business and the history. Stretch yourself. Go to things, you might have thought were interesting years ago, but you never really paid attention to, or something that you really didn't like way back when. Maybe you'll find a new appreciation for it. I think the best example is, most people are exposed to Shakespeare when they're in school. And most of us leave school not liking Shakespeare. And there's a reason for that. Because Shakespeare was never meant to be read. It was meant to be experienced. So instead of reading Shakespeare, watch Shakespeare. On one of the streaming services, or an audiobook of a Shakespeare play. They have loads of them. And you'll see, wait a minute, what was so boring when I was trying to read it, and also because you had to do it, which always, especially as a kid, well, the minute you tell me I have to do it, I don't want to do it. Look at these things with new eyes or new ears in this case. You might find new interests that you never imagined.
Absolutely. It's basically get a routine going and do it every day. So it's so important to do that. There's all kinds of different things that you can do. So one of the things that I definitely want to throw in there, talked about appreciating the present moment. What we're talking about here is gratitude. Just feeling gratitude for everything that's around you. One of my tools, which we talked about a lot, is just keeping a gratitude journal. That's one thing that you can do every day. Is just write down a couple of things that you're grateful for. Only takes a couple minutes. Read it every single day. After you read it before you go to bed, and all of a sudden you got some positive things going on. That's just one simple thing that you can do.
Absolutely, because gratitude, you can be inspired by what you already have in your life, what you're thankful for. And speaking of inspiring, you had mentioned that you watch YouTube earlier. Well, one of the things that YouTube has that I'm sure most people, unless they're really looking for it, come across, they actually have people on YouTube reading famous poems, specifically their favorite poems. It is absolutely amazing listening to Michael Caine and Morgan Freeman giving these dramatic readings. Because again, in school, most of us were exposed to poetry, but it was, either we were reading it or it was being read by your English teacher, who, I mean, let's face it, most of us weren't terribly inspired by our English teachers, But when you hear these performed, the inspiration is there. It brings a whole new effect to it. And again, I was never really into poetry when I studied it in English class, but listening to these performances, it gives me a new appreciation and it does give me that feeling of inspiration.
Yeah, that's something I haven't tried yet. Poetry is always always kind of boring or over my head. So yeah, I, I totally get that. But one of the neat things too about listening to these people who are famous doing it, you can go into YouTube and just type in their names, and
Yep.
you can get biographies on them and other things that they're doing. I mean, if you're fascinated with some of the people out there, go in and do a search on them in YouTube, and so a lot of the times you're going to find some inspirational things from them.
Absolutely. And of course, if you're one of those people that thinks, well, poetry is over my head, I always recommend folks start with Casey at the Bat. Yeah, it's Casey at the Bat's not over anybody's head. And of course, that's another one, most people at some point in their lives were exposed to Casey at the Bat. Very few people know that there were 2 sequels to Casey at the Bat. So you can listen to all 3 of the poems and get the whole story. So there's always more you can do, new ways to learn, new things to learn. And the more you do it, the more, and again, focus on things you enjoy. I've mentioned Shakespeare and poetry, but if that's not your thing, don't feel you have to push through that. Again, find something more lighthearted if that's what you want. If you're into sciences, find something scientific. Lord knows there's tons of scientific documentaries out there. Find something you enjoy. There's more information out there than ever before, and it's easier to get to. So we're just at the end of our time. So, Chip, what do you think is the big takeaway for our listeners this week?
Now, before I get into that, I'm looking at the snow out there for you baseball fans that you want an old-time classic. that's really a spoof on baseball, but so funny. Abbott and Costello's Who's on First. Check that out. You'll definitely be able to find that. So
that's on YouTube. I have watched it on YouTube.
Oh yeah, that is just absolutely hysterical. Just watching those people. But basically, it's figuring out what you want to do, writing down a few things that you want to do as far as personal development goes, be it reading, a little bit of exercise, a gratitude journal, or whatever. But schedule it for the same time every day. I recommend starting the morning doing a positive routine. And if you only started doing a couple of things, that's great. But make sure that that's in your calendar. Put sticky notes on your mirror so you remember in the bathroom to start doing it and so on. But once you start and get the momentum going, there's nothing like a little positive momentum to do it. And there's so many great things out there. But just remember, go to that mirror every other morning and smile, because the coolest person in the world is smiling right back at you. And you deserve to work on yourself and enjoy yourself. And putting together a daily personal growth routine is a perfect way to get it going.
Absolutely. It's so important. And, there's an old saying, if you want to change the world, start with the man in the mirror. And that's what this is about. And these are fun ways to improve yourself. And again, the more you get into this, the more you stand as an example, the more you inspire others to do things like this. And that is how we change the world, one person at a time, starting with yourself. You've been listening to the Success Showcase. You can catch us each week at xvadio.com/podcasts. And if there's a topic you would like us to explore, you can reach out to us now at xvadio.com/connect. We'd love to hear from you. You can also catch us each week on the Apple Podcasts app, Google Podcasts, Spotify, iHeartRadio, Stitcher, Audible, Amazon Music, and wherever you find podcasts. Remember, make this your best week ever and make next week even better. We'll see you then.